Hi there. Welcome to the How to Market Your Horse Business podcast. I'm so glad you're here with me today. My name is Denise Alvarez, and I get the pleasure and honor of hosting you here each week. And I have a business called Storm Lily Marketing, where I also get to help horse business owners like you to turn your website visitors into your customers. And I do that through coaching, as well as website design and content, email marketing strategy, and my monthly coaching program, Social Stride. And I do each of these things so that I can help you be out doing what you love to do. Because I know that marketing may not be your sweet spot. It may not be where you want to spend your time. But as a horse business owner, you know that you need to sharpen that axe a little bit, right? So I want to help you and provide you with step-by-step strategies and basic how-tos that will help you not only see what's possible for your business, but to guide you through that process as well. And so today we're actually venturing out a little bit from just the idea of marketing itself. And I just want to speak to you from the heart of a business owner, right? I bet that at some point in your journey, you have had a fear of failure. Perhaps it's even kept you from making decisions or taking the action that you need to take. It can definitely look different for everybody, and I realize that personalities have a lot to do with that as well. But for many of us, the idea of failing, especially when it comes to your business, can be a little bit scary, right? I mean, if you have employees and you have a team, then you have that on your shoulders. And you may be thinking that if you fail, then that's going to impact them, right? So you're feeling that pressure. Or maybe you're starting out in business and you're following a dream, an idea, a passion that you have had, but you're afraid of failing just for the fact of not succeeding, right? And looking like you didn't know what you were doing. And so I want to invite you to a friend of mine who's going to talk us through this idea of failure and actually help us to reframe it a little bit. Because the reality is when we are frozen in fear, when we don't want to fail, what happens is we don't take action. And you have heard me say before on the podcast, and if we're friends on social media, you've heard me say that we need to take action in order to get clarity, right? We're not going to know what is or is not going to work if we don't take some action. So we're going to talk about that today with Justin Skinner. And you may not have heard of him before because he's not exactly in the horse world, but he's somebody that I wanted you to meet because I think that he and his wife together actually are a wonderful team. That is how I met them. They had a successful graphic design and photography business. His wife has actually taken my family's photos. That's not something she does now. I just got lucky enough for her to say yes. But they have done some really neat things as business owners. And so when I heard that he had a book, I knew I wanted you guys to get to meet him and to learn from him the way that I've had the opportunity to. Now, I have to tell you something super fun is that Justin and his wife, Kendra, actually played a big part in what I do now. When I was first working on building out my business and trying to figure out who I was going to serve, the same way that I encourage you all to do, to really know who it is that you're marketing to and who you're serving, I had the idea of specifically serving horse business owners and marrying those passions of marketing and horses together. But I was actually nervous. I was a little bit afraid of if I was going too narrow or if I just wasn't sure. You just like you all need somebody to talk through things with. I needed someone to talk through things with. So I actually called up Kendra and asked if we could chat for a while, and Justin was there as well. And I told them, the direction that I felt like I was being led and asked what they thought, because while they don't do marketing necessarily and they don't do horse business owners, they do business very well. And I could see that because I'd had the chance to work with them, with the author that many of you know that I had worked with before. And so I had seen the type of business that they had built. I respected them as business owners. And so they were very encouraging. And obviously, you know what happened because I have this podcast and I get to serve horse business owners every day. And I absolutely love it. So I thought it was just so fun when I saw that Justin had a book and I said, hey, I think my audience would love to hear from you. And it's just so fun to see how things work out, right? Because originally he was helping me to figure out, he and Kendra, what I was going to do. And now he gets to come and talk to you all and share some of his knowledge and experience as well. So we are talking about this idea. His book is actually called Professional Failure because he actually encourages people to take those risks, to learn from other people that have maybe failed, quote unquote, failed, and learn from your own quote unquote failures, but to really reframe that. And so I think this is going to be a super helpful conversation for you. You're going to hear some practical ways that you can apply it to your business. And I hope that you will be encouraged and challenged as a horse business owner to really reconsider that idea of failure, to be encouraged to take action. And if you have a team, then you're going to be looking at ways, or I hope you will be looking at ways that you can encourage that culture inside of your business. How can you encourage people to try things and to not be afraid to fail? Because that's how you're going to sometimes get some of the best work, right? And some of the best ideas are going to come about. So I'm super excited for you to meet Justin. I think you're going to really love this conversation. So let's go ahead and get to it. Here is my friend, Justin Skinner. Okay, Justin, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Yeah, Denise, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. I know you have so much goodness that you're going to share about the idea of failure, which is not everybody's favorite topic. But before we jump into that, I would love it if you would share a little bit about your background so that my audience can get to know you a little bit. As we were talking even before we jumped on, you are definitely a multifaceted entrepreneur, which I know horse business owners can identify with. So if you would share a bit about your experiences and how you came to be now an author, and I'm going to call you an expert on the subject of learning from failure.
Yeah, I'll kind of start when I was growing up, and I actually grew up on a dairy farm. Both my grandparents were dairy farmers, so I think that taught me a lot about hard work to begin with. So I grew up there, wound up playing baseball. I worked a lot on the farm, but I love sports, so I played a lot of baseball. I know that gave me a lot of experience in dealing with failures, because in baseball, if you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're a success. So I think that was just ingrained in my mind early on. So that helped a lot. I wound up playing baseball in college, and then wound up honestly, one of the biggest things failure in my life that kind of opened my eyes to failures just being a lesson and not necessarily just holding us down was my goal growing up was to play professional baseball. That was what I trained for. That was what I worked for. And my junior year, I was trying to do everything I could to prepare. And basically they said, hey, go play in this Alaskan baseball league. If you do well up there, I almost guarantee you'll get drafted. So long story short, went up there, spent a summer in Alaska, and played really well, and played with, I think probably, I don't know, there were 6 or 7 guys on our team that got drafted. And I wound up hitting really well. I think I hit over 300, played really well, and made the all-star team up there. So I was like, well, I'm going to get drafted. There's just no doubt in my mind it's going to happen. So fast forward at the end of my senior year, basically had a couple tryouts, had a tryout with the Cubs. And again, they said, yeah, you're going to get drafted. So all my hopes, all my dreams are going to come true. Well, the draft comes along, and I wound up watching it by myself in the house I was living in with a couple other guys. And I was upstairs alone, and I was just watching on the computer, and wound up again. I knew I wasn't going to get drafted in like the top 10 rounds, but I was expecting, later teens or something like that. So anyway, the Cubs would come up, and I'd, wait for a call. I'd wait for something. It just never came. And I think round 32 or 33 came, and they wound up drafting a kid out of high school. And, he was younger, smaller, everything. And at that point I knew it was kind of over. So I shut my computer down, and I just cried basically for 5 minutes. It was pretty tough, but in those 5 minutes, I feel like, there was some hurt, there was some loneliness. It was just a dream that I had always had, and it was just, I knew it was gone. So I knew I had a chance. If I wanted to, I go play independent ball. But in those 5 minutes, I decided that I needed to move on. I needed to do some other things. I was graduating college. I was getting married. So I knew there's some things ahead. But that really taught me about failure. And it wasn't, even though I had a goal and I had been working for 18 years of my life to reach that goal and play professional baseball. Even though it didn't happen, it didn't mean I was a failure. And it didn't mean that all those times of playing baseball were failed or failed attempts, or all the relationships I made, they were all for nothing. I think it really showed me that it prepared me for whatever was next. And I tried to transition all the character traits and the work ethic and relationships into just the next phase of my life. And then fast forward again a couple of years, I was in the corporate world, and I was working for a publishing company. And long story short, I wound up getting fired. And again, I just didn't let it affect me. And I remember getting fired in the morning, and I told Kendra, I just said, you know what, we're going to start our own thing. We're not going to work for anyone anymore. We're not going to put our hands in or our corporate lives or our lives in the hands of someone else to make decisions on when they want us or when they don't. So from that point on, we just switched and we started working for ourselves, and became entrepreneurs and business owners. And honestly, we've loved it ever since.
That's so interesting. I didn't actually know that full background. So I love, though, that your perspective from the start was, even though it didn't happen, it didn't mean it was all for nothing. Was there somebody that taught you that along the way, or is that just kind of how you're built?
No, I definitely think my parents played a huge part in that. I think when I was younger, they really taught us how to fail, and they taught us how to fail gracefully. And what I mean by that is they allowed us to go out. We lived on the farm. I was kind of always going. I wanted to do something. I was a lot like my mom in that way. And anyway, she would send us out, and honestly, we'd see her in the morning. She's like, "Hey, go out, play on the farm. We'll see you at lunch. We'll see you at dinner." So we're out there and we're doing stupid things. We're doing this. We mess up. But honestly, both my parents, I think, gave us grace in that. And they gave us grace when we messed up. And they didn't make us feel like we were bad kids because we did something dumb or we were mean to one of our cousins. And I think that's where I developed it. If I messed up or if I did something wrong, I knew it wasn't on me. I knew I wasn't a bad person, and I knew I wasn't a failure. It was just something to learn from, and it was something to hopefully grow from and get better.
That's awesome, man. I'm sitting here as a parent thinking, okay, parenting lesson right here. But I know that many of my listeners, have kiddos that are growing up on the farm and doing very similar things to what you said. So that's a really good encouragement too. That's a great way for kids to be raised, I think. So I invited you here. Of course, this podcast is how to market your horse business. But as I shared in the intro, you and I have been friends for a while. And so when I saw that you had this book, I immediately thought every business owner, horse business or not, deals with the idea of failure, right? They have ideas that may not work out. They have dreams that maybe didn't come to fruition and they had to pivot and what that was going to look like. And they're always trying things. And so I thought this was a beautiful way to have you share some things, some strategies and tips that you have learned and shared in your book that perhaps will help my audience to reshape their perspective on failure as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I can kind of start. I didn't actually raise horses, but I do love horses. I love, what they are. They're just majestic. But my aunt and uncle raised them growing up. So I actually have a story of failure with a horse, which is kind of funny. So when I was younger, I was actually learning to ride horses, and my aunt was showing me. And long story short, we were doing stuff, and the horse just took off. So I'm on the horse. My aunt is chasing behind. The horse is sprinting down the road, and I have no control over the horse. I'm just holding on and trying to fall off. So it's sprinting down an asphalt road that's pretty busy. So the whole time I'm thinking, what in the world? And I'm probably 11 or 12 at that time. And eventually it stops. Nothing I feel like I did. But anyway, I learned that, if I'm going to ride horses, I have to learn to command them. And I can't just hop on and expect everything to go well. So with that, I feel like, the goal of the book and the goal of just writing and hopefully encouraging people is that failures are in every facet of business. Honestly, I grew up with sports in mind, but it translated to business. And I think it's in everything. It's in parenting, it's in business. And you just have to learn to deal with it. So the goal of the book was just to flip that on its head and just say that, failures aren't something to be feared. It's actually something that you could almost pursue and say, hey, I'm okay failing. And I almost welcome it because that means I'm going to grow. That means I'm going to learn from it. And even if that failure isn't necessarily a success, just that process of learning is the success in and of itself.
That's so good. And honestly, as somebody who is definitely a perfectionist, but I know I have learned so much about the weaknesses involved in that. There are strengths too, of course, and excellence. But there are weaknesses when it comes to being a perfectionist. And some of it is being able to switch that around, right? So that and as horse business owners that are listening that maybe have that struggle as well, don't miss the opportunities that are there in the gift of failure as business owners. So I'm so grateful that you have written that and are diving into that today. So I know that you have some practical ways to look at that. And I love that on this podcast, we definitely try to provide some how-tos and practical takeaways. So concepts are great, but when you can actually take it and apply it, that's even better. So what are some of the ways that we can use the gift of failure as a business owner?
Yeah, and I'll kind of talk about highlighting four from the book. And the first one would be the fallacy of self-made. Second would be failing forward. Third would be curiosity. And then fourth would be an overflow mentality. So the fallacy of self-made, I think it's important to understand where we come from and recognize our mentors, because I don't think anyone is self-made. And you hear this all the time in the media. So-and-so is the first person to be a self-made billionaire. They're a self-made millionaire. It's just all the time. And I think it puts this concept in our mind that we have to do everything on our own, when to me, that's the furthest thing from the truth, because we have so many good people around us, even if it's not our parents or family or friends. There's just people that you can learn from that are highly intelligent and have a lot of unique experiences that they can share with you. So I think it's important to understand that you're not self-made. That's not taking anything away from you, but I think it's giving value where value is due to other people. I know, for you, for instance, we've learned a lot from you. We haven't, Kendra and I haven't, had the chance to spend a ton of time with you, but in the little time we have, you taught us things. You've been a light, and you're just, you're fun to be around. And so little relationships, a mentor doesn't have to be someone who's in your life 24/7. It can be an acquaintance or a one-time meeting at a coffee shop. And I think we just have to be open to that. And I think once we do that, it puts us in like a humble state of mind. And honestly, the key to learning and growing from failure is humility. You have to be open to learning and not thinking that you know everything already.
Oh, that's so good. Well, first of all, thank you for your kindness. That was really kind. And honestly, in the intro, I shared a bit about how you and Kendra actually were a huge encouragement to me in the process of starting my business. I don't know if you remember, but Kendra and I'd asked to chat with her because I was really wanting to niche down, and I respected you guys as business owners. And I was like, okay, if I go straight horse businesses, am I crazy? And it's been one of the best decisions I made. So,
awesome.
But the same for a lot of horse business owners, and in the horse world, you will hear this idea a lot of just in the horse training world. So I went to an event called Road to the Horse a couple of weeks ago, or I guess it's been about a month now. And at that event, I noticed that is a colt starting competition. And so there are 4 trainers at the event that are each starting a colt in a certain amount of time. And then they have an obstacle course to go through at the end. But what I noticed is that each one would share, when it was their time to have the microphone on, what they were sharing was, so-and-so taught me this years ago, or I learned this from so-and-so. And yes, they adapt it and make it their own, but there was not one person there that would say, I learned all of this on my own by myself, in a box, right? We're always to be successful in that process of learning from another. So I love that. The fallacy of self-made, for sure. What else?
Yeah. And then the concept of just failing forward. I think failure should be looked at as our teacher and not our enemy. And I think that people too often see it as, something that is maybe on them, and it almost like seeps into their being that if they fail at anything, it doesn't matter. Like it could be sports, or even like picking up something and tripping over in the house and spilling something. It's like, instead of all that weighing down on you, I think failure should be looked at as, again, a lesson. So what I mean by failing forward is just have that concept in mind. When you fail, if you go out and fail, whatever it is, instead of thinking, man, I'm a failure, I failed at this, I didn't do well, I think you have to keep in mind that there is a lesson within that. And a cool story, over the weekend, I went to watch our nephew, and I feel like he did this really well. He's playing flag football, and he's been, preparing to play quarterback. He's wanted to play quarterback for a while. So anytime I see him, he's got a football and he's playing it with his dad, and they're working on it, and he wants to play catch anytime we see each other. And it's one of those things where it's just like, you've been training with him, and you throw with him and say, hey, just be prepared when it's time, when it's ready. And anyway, this weekend, he finally got a chance to play, and his first pass, he threw a long pass, and it could have been a touchdown, but the receiver drops it. And then the next three plays were all incomplete. So technically, the first series didn't go well, and they didn't score a touchdown. They didn't even move the ball, but he kept with it, and he kept going, and he wound up throwing 3 touchdowns in the game, and I think they wound up winning. But anyway, after the game, his dad, Derek, came up to me and basically said, hey, Nolan, what'd you tell me? Tell Justin and Kenner what you told me. And he said that, I was scared and I was nervous at first, and I didn't want to mess up. And then, Justin, I remember your book, that it's okay.
Oh,
It's okay not to fail. And I think, I mean, maybe I shouldn't be emotional about it, but I think that to me is why I wrote the book. I want kids or adults or whoever it is to just be encouraged through failure. And so that story, that like hits home to me. I want people to be able to succeed through failures, and not see them as something to fear, because I think it can cause inaction. And I think the magic is in effort, is in action.
the magic is in action. That's good, because you're right. It can definitely cause you to just stop when something doesn't go according to your plan. And like you said, it's really reimagining, right, the definition of failure, right? Because
Exactly.
inherently failure is failing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to remember, I believe it might have been Chip from the Chip and Joanna couple, Chip Gaines, in his book, but he
Yeah.
was talking about that similar concept. He's like, you either win or you learn, you don't lose.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
that's a perspective, like some people would call it losing. Some people would say, no, I learned. But
Yeah.
being able to look at it that way enables you to learn from it. And boy, but it's not easy, right? It's not, well,
Not
maybe it seems easy
not at
for you,
all.
Justin. I'm not going to lie, but it's not easy for the
No.
rest of us.
No, it's definitely not easy. And it's something that I've learned, and I'm still learning, because honestly, there are times where I've done things 10 times and I know the right thing to do, and I still fail at it, and it's frustrating. And I just have to remember, take a step back and breathe, and not let it lead to anger, which is easy, and, something I still have to work on, but it's still not easy. It's definitely not easy to navigate. But I think when you can have a different perspective or mindset on it, it definitely helps. And it helps to have great people around you that encourage you and say, hey, you failed, but you're not a failure. It's part of it. It's okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. So I'm taking riding lessons right now to learn how to jump, because growing up, I
Oh,
always
wow.
rode Western. And one of my dreams as a kid was always to learn how to jump. And so I'm super excited I get to do that now.
Yeah.
Because I'm such a learner, I'm always like wanting to learn and watch videos and read articles to learn the best way to do it. Right. Not that I'm trying to be an
Hmm.
Olympic, and not that I could, but I just want to do it well. So
Yeah.
my instructor is awesome, because she knows, she has learned that when I do so, the jumps that I'm going over, right, are not huge, but for me, it's a big deal. And even
Yeah.
going over it, I'm like, oh man, as soon as I land, I'm like, oh shoot, my foot, or oh dang it, I squeezed with my knees, or oh, my arms were out. Like I know
Yeah.
immediately what I was doing wrong. And she's like, Denise, focus on the good things that you did and that you're learning,
Yep.
and I told her, I'm like,
Yep.
I promise you, I'm having fun. This is a process for me to
Yeah.
learn what I'm doing and fix it, but also celebrate, the fact that I'm
Hmm.
here and I'm getting to do this. But it's a mindset shift that I constantly have to
Yeah.
remind myself, don't just enjoy, and don't look at it as
Yep.
you failed at that one, look at the things you did right and did well. So
Yeah, and I still struggle with that too. It's like I do the same thing. I do something, and instead of seeing the things I did right, I'm often really picky about myself. I'm like, oh, I did this wrong. I did this wrong. So I think it's tricky. It's not, like I said, it's not easy. But just because if you do something right, that's great. But just store it away and say, okay, I did this right. This is where I can get better. But I think the important lesson is just don't beat yourself up. Just enjoy the moment. Enjoy what you're doing.
yeah, so, so true. Okay. What else do you have for us?
All right. So the other one is curiosity. And I love this one. I want to say it's Albert Einstein that said this, and I should know this because it's in the book. But now that I'm looking for my notes, I didn't note it.
Right.
But basically he said something, he said something along the lines of, my greatest, or I'm going to mess this up. Basically, I have nothing more to offer than I am extremely curious. And I butchered it completely, but next time I know. And so this is part of the failure in action. I'll go make sure I know what it is next time. But anyway, I think that being curious, again, it'll open the door to mentors. It'll open the door to conversations because when you're curious about a subject and you're curious to learn. You don't know everything. And I think it helps in my day-to-day life too, just being curious about people, being curious about people's stories. And I had a guy on the podcast actually recently who said he felt like he was an archaeologist and he loved digging for people's stories with him, and he had to be very careful and he couldn't dig too fast or too hard, but he liked uncovering people's stories, and I love that. And I think that goes back to curiosity. And if you're curious and you show interest in people and you're curious about their story, I think it gives them value. And I think that that goes beyond yourself, and that's part of what leads to the overflow mentality, which I'm talking about. I think that as yourself, as you fill up and you learn to deal with failures, or you become successful in your life, I think it's important to give back. And honestly, you don't have to be super wealthy or super knowledgeable or be the wisest person in the world to give back. I know there may be some people that disagree with my take on where your self-confidence comes from, because I think that's highly important. If you're going to give back, you have to believe in yourself, because if you don't, no one else is going to believe you. And if you don't believe in yourself, then how are you going to believe in someone else? So I think that's key. And for me, I think self-confidence comes from a belief in God, and it comes from a belief in Jesus Christ. And if you don't have that, I don't know how people do it without that. It's difficult. But again, people may disagree with me on that, but at least for me, that's where it comes from. So once you have that, and once you're healthy with yourself and your self-confidence is high, you can encourage people and you can help people chase their dreams. And if they have an idea about something, instead of like picking everything apart about what's wrong with it, just encourage them and say, hey, you know what, go for it. You're going to mess up. It's okay. It's part of it. But I think it's really important to, as we become successful, or whatever success is in our own minds, to really keep in mind other people and not try and step on them on the way up, but to actually lift them up and bring them up with you. I think that's just a really vital concept to keep for anyone. Doesn't have to be business, doesn't have to be sports, but if you can just encourage people around you, I think it comes back to you tenfold.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Absolutely. I want to go back to where you're talking about curiosity, because that idea of curiosity as it relates to failure as well, it made me think of when you have failed, when something has not gone according to plan, right? You didn't meet your goals. That idea of curiosity, I think, is also just being willing to look at it and say, okay, maybe it didn't go like I thought it would, didn't go like I expected, but what, like asking some really good questions along the way, right?
Absolutely.
Like, what can I learn from it? What did go well? Kind of digging into it to be able to sometimes, like you said, the guy that's the archaeologist, sometimes you have to be able to be an archaeologist with yourself, right? And be willing to dig in and ask those questions so that you can really see, where your passions lie. What are you excited about? What went well? What went well with the conversation? Whatever the case may be, to be able to ask some of those really helpful but hard questions sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned goals too. And one thing that I may be a little odd at, or at least I was taught early on, and it's really helped me, is just goal setting. And I kind of got to the point, I feel like a lot of people get beat down by expectations and they set a monetary goal or they set, I want to be here by this date. And if they don't meet that, they can get discouraged. So I'm not saying goals are a bad thing, but what I've learned is that if I can set goals that are going to at least like point me in the right direction that I want to go. I don't have to like make a certain amount of money or sell a certain amount of books or anything like that. What my goals are, I want to read so many pages during the year. I want to pray for wisdom. I want to do all these little things that I know are going to help me in my journey because really ultimately I want to be a resource for people. So that's my ultimate goal. I don't have a monetary goal or, like I said, like a fame goal or anything like that. I just want to help people. So if I do that, I've got to read. I've got to put a lot of good things inside of me. So that goes to reading, to praying, to meditating, whatever it is. I've got to fill myself up in order to help other people.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that goes back to I love that concept, by the way, of goals, of that idea of it's almost more about who you want to be than like the tangible.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how that leads into that idea of overflow mentality. So how do you see
Yeah.
that idea of overflow mentality, giving back? How do you see that as connected to failure as a business owner? Dive into that just a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, I think failures, we all, it doesn't matter who it is, if you're an entrepreneur or you're a business owner, you're going to fail. And I think the key to that is going back to mentors, because without mentors, I wouldn't be where I am today. You wouldn't be where you are today. I think a lot of people wouldn't. So in order to be a mentor yourself, you need to share the lessons from your failures, because you can actually help someone skip a lot of pain by saying, "Hey, I did this. You don't have to do this." And obviously, experience sometimes is the best teacher, but often there are lessons that I don't have to go through in order to learn from. And I think that's really important. So that overflow mentality really comes back to sharing and believing in others, and whatever you've learned, knowing that you have value, and that lesson, whatever you've learned from failure, can actually help someone else. So instead of holding on to it, and keeping to yourself and saying I have this secret, or it's all me, this is why I'm successful. I think just being open and saying, hey, you can do this. I'm not really that special. I just learned from these people, or I learned these lessons. Here are these lessons. Go do it yourself. You can do it. I think it's just, again, it comes back to being an encouragement and a mentor to others.
Okay. I love that. That's great. Yeah, so true. When you have this opportunity as a business owner to learn and experience whatever success ends up looking like for you, then
Mhm.
yeah, looking for some intentional ways to pour into others, and just being willing to share. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing, Justin. Is there anything
Yeah.
else that you would love my listeners to know about the idea of failure?
So the last thing that I'll talk about and mention is just to keep in mind the fear of failure, and that how fear itself is pretty powerful. So I would encourage your listeners to, when you experience fear, the fear of failure, don't spread it. What you can do, you can absorb it through prayer or meditation or action, even, because if you are fearful yourself, you can easily pass that on to someone else. If you can deal with it yourself, I think you can, from that, encourage others. Fear is not fun. It's definitely not something that a lot of people want to talk about, but it's easily spreadable. It's more contagious than a virus. So if you can learn to handle the fear of failure, I think that's something that's highly important. And if you can get past it, I think that's contagious too. I think the absence of fear of failure is contagious. So to me, it's the choice. You make the choice to be fearful and spread that, or not to be fearful and spread that.
Oh man, that's powerful. That's so powerful. Because especially, well, for one, honestly, for a super tangible example, I cannot stand
Mhm.
snakes. And even though I
Yeah.
grew up in the country, I can't
Yep.
handle them. And the longer I've lived not in the country, the longer like it's gotten worse in my head. And
Yeah.
I am trying not to pass that on to my kids because I
Yeah.
wasn't like that as a kid. It's just as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
But that's just, and that's a small, tiny example, but that shows how easily, like you said, it can spread and we can pass that
For
on.
sure.
But even more so, the idea of fear of not even trying. Like when you
Yep.
rode that horse back in the day, that could have easily have been a chance for you to say, I'm never getting back on a horse again. And just
Hmm.
sitting in that fear, which I guess you didn't finish. I assume you've gotten back on at some point, maybe.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I
Okay.
have. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely have. I've
Awesome.
ridden horses through mountains and things like that, but
Awesome.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've definitely gotten over that, but it's
Yeah.
something I've learned and been encouraged by over the years.
Yeah, you could have just sat in that and then let it spread, And so, even as a business owner, just thinking about that idea of the fear of rejection, right? Feeling,
Yep.
that fear of not wanting to reach out to people to sell your business, right? Or to let people know what you're selling.
Yeah.
Just there's so many different facets that I can see if
Yeah.
you have a team, business owners that have a
Yeah.
team, if you are
Yeah.
operating from a place of fear, then you're building that culture inside of your business and people are going to do
Yeah.
the same. But if you can give them the opportunity, the freedom to explore, the freedom to make mistakes, man, what a healthy culture that will be in your business as well.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. And one last business thought.
yeah.
It's just since I grew up on the farm, I equate a lot to farming. So one thing that may be applicable to business owners is just the idea of planting seeds. From who I've talked with and what I've seen, a lot of businesses that just either wound up not working out or, the owners felt like it wasn't working was because they were just in a hurry. They either had high expectations or they just expected an overnight success. And I would just encourage people to just think of it from planting seeds. And as a farmer, you go out and you plant seeds, but if you go and check it the next day, it's not going to come up. You're not going to see anything, but something's happening. And I think you have to keep that in mind that the harvest will come. You just have to be consistent and you have to continually plant seeds. And you can plant seeds in your business, you can plant seeds in other relationships, but just keep that in mind that steady, slow growth is a good thing. It's healthy.
Oh, okay. So I'm in the process of reading your book and I just read that last night.
Mm.
And it caught my eye because I'm also going through a Bible study called Growing Slow. I think that's what the
Yeah.
title is. And it's a similar concept. It's being willing to do the hard work and to know
Hmm.
that you're planting seeds. It's exactly what you said. So that's beautiful. I'm so glad you shared
Yeah,
that steady growth. It's so much healthier too, right? It allows you to put
for
down
sure.
roots.
Yeah.
So that's great encouragement. Okay. I'm so grateful that you have shared these things. I would love for
Yeah.
everybody listening to be able to know where they can find you. Of course, in the show notes for the episode, I will put a link to your book and a link to your website and Instagram
Yeah.
and all those things. But go ahead and say it verbally as well for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at Justin C. Skinner. You can find me there. And then also you can grab the book on Amazon and then you can listen to the Professional Failure podcast too, on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then you can check out www.professional-failure.com. And it should have links everywhere. So I appreciate you letting me come on. It's been a really fun conversation and so good talking to you again.
You too, Justin. Thank you. All right. What did I tell you? I hope that you really enjoyed that conversation. I hope that you're letting some of the things that Justin shared just kind of simmer with you throughout the day. I know one of my biggest notes that I took is that idea that failure is your teacher and not your enemy. And definitely, I don't know if you all have done the Enneagram, but I am a 1. And so that is definitely a perfectionist. So the idea of reframing what failure is has really been huge for me. And as I've learned to do that as a business owner, and I continue to learn to do that, it reframes how I coach as well in my marketing coaching and in my social stride program. And frankly, as a parent, right? I love some of the things that Justin shared, that idea of allowing your kids to fail. It's the same, like I shared in the intro, as I introduced him, that idea of letting your team being willing to fail, so to speak, but it's not failing, right? Because you're going to get new ideas. You're going to allow people to grow. And it really will be beneficial for your business as you reframe this idea of failure. So I hope this was encouraging to you. I would love to hear from you if it was helpful. So find me on Instagram, Storm Lily Marketing, or send me an email, denise@stormlily.com. I would love to hear from you all what was helpful in this episode. And of course, you can get the highlights of our conversation at stormlily.com/79 for episode number 79. And you'll also find links there where you can leave a review. If you happen to listen on Apple and you would leave a review for fellow listeners to see or new friends to see how this podcast has been helpful for you, I would be so, so grateful, and I know they would as well. And then, of course, if you are not already following the podcast, be sure that you are getting notified when new episodes are available. You can do that in any of your favorite podcast listening apps, all right? And of course, if we're email friends, I will also always let you know every week what the topic is on the podcast. And of course, if you have any ideas for the podcast, questions that you have, people you would like to hear interviewed on the podcast, please feel free to reach out and share those as well. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I truly hope it's been an encouraging and helpful conversation, and I will see you again here next week. Have an awesome day.